Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Drew Stark, and I am the Vice President of Sales for Ataccama in the North American office, and I would like to welcome you all to our webinar today. Today, we will be focusing on a very interesting topic across many enterprises, and that would be data lineage. So over the course of the next 40 minutes or so, we'll talk about data lineage fundamentals, of course, why we need data lineage, what business challenges it addresses, what you should look for in data lineage tools, and how a successful implementation can be ensured in your organization. We'll also touch on augmented data lineage and why we're hearing about it more and more often. So we move on to the introduction of the speakers for today. I would like to present you guys with David Bryan. So David Bryan is the Director of Pre-Sales at MANTA, and Borek Vavrik, who is the Product Manager at Ataccama. Now, a little bit of background information. So prior to joining MANTA, David worked for Blackline, a financial close management SaaS provider, where he was Vice President of Global Pre-Sales, and over a 20-plus year career in the information management technology sector, Mr. Bryan has guided technology teams with Computer Associates and also with Infor. Before focusing on technology, David also served as Chief Financial Officer in the services industry as well. And moving over to Borek, as the product manager at Ataccama, Borek has an extensive background in technical and software development. Prior to joining Ataccama, he delivered products in e-commerce and supply chain. Borek's experience and knowledge has allowed him to drive the vision and execution of the Ataccama data catalog. So combined, we have many years of experience here today to assist you guys. And moving on to the agenda items for today, let's take a closer look. So firstly, we will pass off to David, who will introduce data lineage, why it's necessary to have data lineage, and how data lineage can be produced. And then we'll pass it over to Borek and talk about MANTA and Ataccama's combined solution and introduce the concept of augmented data lineage. We are going to have question and answer period towards the end of the session. Please feel free, though, to share your questions in the Q&A section as we go along. So those can be viewed and ready to go for the end of the session when we will have that period. If you do stay to the end, you'll get a chance to win an Amazon voucher worth $30 US or any equivalent currency depending on where you're located today. All you'll have to do is fill out a short survey, so please stay with us to the end. And to get started, I will hand it over to David for more. So David, the floor is yours to get going.
Oh, thank you very much, Drew. So I want to dive right into data lineage. So we're going to start with what is data lineage? Quite simply, it's tracking a piece of data as it starts in your system at the point of origin, all the way through all the machinations of what happens to it, moving it on to what usually is a report or a dashboard where it ends up. So, you know, the question that people have when they open up a dashboard and they look at a number often is, where did that number come from? How did it get here? And data lineage is intended to answer that question. So it will track the information flow through the system. We'll talk about who needs it and how it does that, which typically the question people have is, how does it do that? Because people have had the question for years and it hasn't been easy to get to that answer. So hopefully we'll shed a little light on that today. So first, a little bit more about the data lineage flow itself. So there are lots of different tools in your IT environment, and we need to take a look at how that data passes through each of the tools. It's stored in a database, and it goes through and is acted upon by typically ETL tools or extract, transform, and load. Now there's a version of ETL called ELT, but essentially the concept is the same. It's moving the data from point A to the end use of that particular data. And data lineage is trying to identify what the origin of the data is, so that the user can actually have confidence in that data. The things that we call transformations are, how is the data changed? Did somebody take it and put it into different terms so that I could understand it better? Maybe you wanted to have it shown differently. Maybe you wanted to have data combined so that it would end up in a report in an intelligent display. Perhaps in the case of PII, we're all familiar with the fact that when you get your credit card statement or you look at your account information online, often a big part of your account number will have asterisks in it, and you're just seeing a portion of the account number. How did that happen along the way? Those are the transformations that you're interested in and that you're interested in seeing. And of course, the endpoints. So is it being shown on a dashboard? Is there a report that's available? Is somebody taking the data and putting it into an Excel spreadsheet? All of this information is very important as we are interested in the full data lineage flow. Wanted to show you what this looks like in MANTA. So this is an extremely high level view of the information. And you can see all the way over here on the left, there's an Oracle database system. And this data is flowing into this customer's report on the right-hand side. Now in MANTA, we actually allow you to see where you started the data lineage view. So this one started in the customer's report, and that's why it is colored black, so that as you're viewing the lineage, you always have that perspective. And that's why it shows these two schemas on the left-hand side, so that you know that those two schemas are feeding into the report that has all of the customer information in it. That data flows through this Informatica Power Center workflow here. And it is, as an intermediate storage area, perhaps a data warehouse, it's being shown here in a Microsoft SQL Server database. Now you'll notice that colors are used very heavily. It's simply trying to use every mechanism possible to make that lineage as apparent and as consumable as possible as you're trying to understand the very complex flow. As I mentioned, this is the very simple, very high level flow, simply showing movement from one system to another. But as we dive into details, you may lose where you are. The colors help you a bit. If you have problems differentiating the colors for any particular reason, you can always click on an element and the detail window will show you all of that information so that you continue to have access to it. So let's talk a bit more about why you need data lineage. It starts by delivering actionable intelligence. And what do I mean about that? Well, so as you're working on a flow or you have a problem, you may need to immediately take action to correct some information. It also improves your confidence in the data. So that's actionable intelligence. It's available to you to be able to interpret the quality of the data, where it comes from, is it meaningful to me? Are the sources that I think should be included in that information actually included in that information? And it also enables digital transformation. So as we move from manual systems long ago to digital systems, and that automation continues through artificial intelligence and machine learning. So data lineage is critical, and it's becoming more and more critical the more advanced we get with things like AI, so that we can understand as this automation happens on our data, exactly how the data is getting there, and it increases our confidence in that data that it's completely accurate. So I want to introduce a poll now. And this is just for you to share a bit of your understanding and your experience with data. I want you to simply tell me how easy it is for you to determine the source of the numbers in your financial reports. So when you look at a financial report, um, how do you see the information? Do you find it very easy to understand where the information comes from? Or, as I often hear, well, in my department, I get these expense numbers and I have no idea where these expenses came from. So I'm really interested in how difficult it is for you to determine the source of information of any financial report or information that you take a look at. And in a few minutes, I'll share that result with you. And in the interim, let's go ahead and move on with who in your organization is really interested in data lineage. Well, there's actually a very wide range of people, from the people who are making immediate decisions in the business area to the people who are working hard in the IT area to deliver that quality information. So there are some very important pieces to this. So for example, from a compliance perspective, there is people who are interested in documenting the data lineage so that they can report on the trustworthiness of the data, also report on things like the personal information that is maintained in the data, where it's accessed, those types of things. So the risk management people are incredibly interested in the data lineage. The data analysts need to be able to enable the delivery of the information and the understanding of the information. And as the conduit between the business organization and the IT organization, they'll be referencing the data lineage to make sure that they're delivering that correct information. The analysts also have another role where they're very interested in focusing on critical reports. And as they focus on those critical reports, obviously they'll want to have visibility into the source of data for those critical reports. From the data scientist perspective, they're very interested in exactly how the data has made it to a particular point and the transformations that happened in those particular points, and certainly automating some of the transformations so that we can better analyze the data and take advantage of the entire collection of data. The IT team is incredibly interested in data lineage because they're the people that are impacting the data. And as they make changes to the data, they want to understand every impact that that change makes. So it's incredibly critical to the IT team that they have an accurate view of the technical lineage. So there are really three main areas that we talk about that data lineage addresses. And I talk about those broadly as we talked about who needs the data lineage. But the areas are data governance, data ops, and for the use in migration. So whenever you're doing migrations of systems, today we talk a lot about cloud migrations. You want to know what the current status of your system is, and then the planned architecture of your system so that you can understand and plan better how to control those phases of the migration from your existing legacy systems to the planned future systems. So all three of these areas are critical, and I'm going to talk to them one by one. So let's go first into the data governance area. And probably the biggest thing that we hear about today in the data governance area is meeting regulatory requirements. The regulations are coming out so fast that it's hard to keep track of them. They sound like alphabet soup. We've got CCPA, which is the California Consumer Privacy Act, CPRA, the California Privacy Rights Act. A new one just came out in Virginia called the CDPA, or the Consumer Data Protection Act. And of course, we're all familiar with what I call the granddaddy of them all, the GDPR in the European Union. And I live in the US, so I thought, oh, the GDPR is something I don't have to be concerned about. Wrong, because US companies actually have to be concerned about the usage of their data by European companies if they sell to any of those or if they sell to European consumers. US companies are become very, very involved in GDPR compliance as well. And of course, we all know about HIPAA and the consequences of sharing that personal information and the need to be able to control and understand where that personal information is. There are specific regulations that are relevant to the finance industry and banking, including BCBS 239 and the Basel components with their updates in Basel 2 and Basel 3. And I remember when everybody thought it was a big deal when SOX came out and we were concerned about that information. And if you really think about what SOX, the focus of SOX is, it's really where does your information come from, right? Having confidence in that data. So while we're talking about the confidence in the data, let's go ahead and share the results with everybody of the polling information. And I'll just go ahead and bring it up here on my screen to make sure that you can see the information. But I see that only 5% of the people involved thought that the financial information was very easy to get to. And that's about what I expected, or the source of the information for the financials was very easy to get to. Interestingly enough, 42% of you thought that it could be determined with reasonable effort. And of course, it's very difficult to understand or define what reasonable effort is, right? But so some of you are understanding what the source of the data is, and I would assume that would give you trust in the data. And you can also explain that to your auditors and anybody who questions that information. That's really good. The key here is how many people think it's very difficult or impossible. And I can see that that's what, 53%. So over half of you actually thought that the information was very difficult or impossible to trace the source of that information. And that really is what data lineage is all about. So let's go ahead and continue to dive into that a bit more. So this is what the view looks like in MANTA. In this case, I've clicked on the date of birth over here in the actual customer's report. And MANTA gives you the ability to click on any information, and you can see that it will highlight in yellow the information that you've clicked on. And then it highlights in blue all of the sources of the information. And you can see that it's done that at a very low level. If you look over here in this Oracle table, you can actually see the column that is the source of the information in the report. Now, I've minimized the detail here in the center so that this would all fit on one screen and you could see it easily. But that could be as complex as it needs to be or as it is in your environment. And still, you can go all the way back to the source and see the actual columns of data that are contributing to that. Now, the other point is that this information may be much more complex. So the CRM client table in Oracle may have many more columns, but I'm not interested in them at this point. I'm only interested in which columns are feeding the customer's report. And that's why I show this direct lineage to that particular information. So for the data ops use of the system, there are some key elements here. Of course, the data operations people are very interested in the completeness of the lineage. So we want to make sure that that entire data pipeline end to end is fully mapped in the system so that they can easily find problems in the system. So that's doing source analysis from wherever the problem is occurring back to the original source. But the data ops people often are really focused on the impact analysis. So what happens if I've found that a piece of data needs to be changed, and I'm going to go in, let's say there's a stored procedure, and you need to update that stored procedure in the system. With a right click in MANTA, you can say, what is the impact of changing this particular element? And it will list for you all of the components that are going to be impacted with that particular change. And that way, when you introduce a fix for one problem, you're not also introducing a problem into the system that breaks other elements that you may not have considered. It allows you to understand the full impact of that particular change. MANTA also provides a whole series of APIs that you can use so that you can automate these types of solutions. One of my customers created a system where they call a MANTA API whenever data is delayed upstream or the data is corrupted. And that API provides back to them in this automated fashion a list of all the elements downstream that are impacted. They focus on reports, and then through their automation, they let the users know which reports are impacted so that the users know that they can't rely on that data until that particular problem is fixed. That has increased the trust in data tremendously in their system. So this is a view of some of the information that you get within MANTA. Notice that I've clicked here on full name again, and with the drop-down window, it displays for me the attribute value that shows the transformations. In this case, it's a concatenation of the first name and the family name to determine what will be populated in full name in the rep client table. And this is an example of the types of expressions that you have available within MANTA so that you can identify problems and understand the changes in the data throughout the data pipeline. When you're planning migrations and understanding the scope of the migrations, one of the first things that you realize and recognize is that you can't do the entire migration immediately. So you can't just say, okay, today we're going to migrate all of our systems to the cloud. It obviously has to be done in phases. Obviously that seems rather intuitive. The difficult part is then how do you break up the sections that you're going to migrate? Well, MANTA's data lineage allows you to identify the impact on particular areas. What most of my customers do is they identify key reports and what the sources of that key report, all of the processes feeding that key report that need to be migrated to make that particular report maintain its functionality and its accuracy. So in that way, they can split up and better plan the entire migration of the system, understand all the components that need to be migrated. And MANTA allows you to identify not only the direct feeds into that system, but the indirect feeds. In other words, what is controlling or filtering the data that creates that report? Because not all the data is in the report. I may be looking at another table to identify whether or not that particular report can be produced. Let's take the example of pricing information. Often pricing information has a lookup table that it has to reference in order to make the pricing information on the quote be valid. So if you forget to migrate that pricing table that's being looked up on, then you will have missed a major component of the migration. You may not have noticed that if you only looked at the direct lineage. The indirect lineage will give you that information if you have control elements that are controlling which pricing to take a look at. Equally useful are things like identifying which sections of the lineage are not being used anymore. Are there dead ends in your lineage? Are there unused assets? So that you're not concerned with migrating that information up the chain. So this is an example of the visibility of indirect lineage within MANTA as well as direct lineage. You can see that these solid lines that are being represented show the actual direct flow of information downstream. If you see the dashed lines, they're telling you that that's indirect lineage. Those are the things that are usually represented with where clauses, joins, that type of thing. So here I can see that this customer number is being controlled, for example, by the address purpose key in this party address H table. So I know when I am migrating that information that I have to be very conscientious to make sure that I'm migrating this entire processing sequence, not just the elements that are controlled by the direct lineage. Okay, so you need both aspects, the direct and the indirect lineage. So what makes lineage or data lineage difficult to achieve? Well, there's actually so many different factors that I couldn't fit them on the slide. So I want to talk about some of the key factors that impact the calculation of data lineage. The first is just the scope of what you're trying to evaluate and trying to look at. I talked to one of my customers who used to work at a big bank where they tried to manually map all of their data lineage and put that together. And it was so critical to them that they actually put together a team of 100 specialists. And those 100 specialists worked for 2 years to put the data lineage together. And they were completely successful. At the end of the 2 years, they had accurate data lineage, at least the way that the system was when they started the documentation. The problem was that by the time that they got to the end of the 2 years, it was now out of date. So that brings us to the rate of change. So you have to have data lineage that is completely automated so that the system can provide for you what the current data lineage is so that you quickly see that information. The other piece that we're interested in is comparing that data lineage as it changes over time. So that's very critical to you, and you want to be able to see that in your system. So now let me answer that difficult question that I said was the most popular question that our customers have, which was, how does MANTA create the actual lineage? There have been lineage systems on the market for years. Most of them are focused on people documenting the lineage that they go through and they discover in the system, and then they apply that to a system that allows them to visualize that. MANTA is a bit different. MANTA actually goes out and crunches or analyzes all of the SQL in the system, the ETL, your reports, and these are just examples of the information that we go out and extract and analyze. So when you're implementing MANTA, in most cases, what you do is you actually provide just the location of the information. So for example, what is the server connection to Oracle or to Snowflake or one of your other environments, or to the ETL tool, and you provide a user ID to that tool, typically a service ID, and a password. And then MANTA connects to that system, extracts all of the important components, the metadata of that system, including stored procedures and other workflow information, brings that back to MANTA, and begins the analysis of that component. And then it starts to document that lineage along the way. And by documenting it, I mean that we store it in a graph database. And we also document not just the lineage of that individual component, but the way that it connects to other components. So in other words, that's how we get the joins between Oracle and Informatica to Power BI. All of those appropriate joins along the way. And that graph database allows you to visualize that lineage, and that visualization can be done in MANTA's native user interface, which is completely browser-based. And then also, we typically push that data out to a governance solution. Today, we'll be talking about MANTA pushing that data to Ataccama and exploring that information. So now I'd like to hand it over to Borek so that he can cover exactly how Ataccama and MANTA work together to provide a more complete solution. Borek?
Thank you, David. So let me now tell you how do we actually work together with MANTA, because it's not just about fetching the lineage from MANTA to the Ataccama platform, but it's about enriching it with lots of metadata, the data quality, and other features that in the interplay create great additional value that we could actually understand as augmented lineage. So what MANTA does perfectly is really the discovery of the data flows between data assets. However, we in Ataccama have the full firing power of the data governance suite and data quality suite. More specifically, it's about functional areas of the catalog, glossary, data quality, anomalies driven by artificial intelligence. And so before telling you what are the specific business use cases in the augmented data lineage and how do we actually deliver on those, let me give you a just brief walkthrough of the Ataccama One platform. So here, this is a screenshot from the catalog. So the catalog is focused mainly on documenting and understanding your metadata. It basically allows you to connect to your data sources, pretty much any type of data sources. We've got a really vast array of connectors. From that, fetch the metadata automatically, so load them into the catalog. This could be obviously data sets, it could be reports or any other type of metadata. You can also document the metadata manually as well as its relationships. And when you do all this, you can enable pretty much anybody from your organization as a data consumer access this data and understand what it contains as well as what is its context. Not only that, we actually enable you to get actionable insights from the data, because it's not just about having it there with all the documentation, but it's also very important for you to, and it saves time, right? To know what are the either issues or interesting insights that are worth studying, and you can then save the time. So catalog is one major functional area. The other one is glossary that allows you to document and manage data domains. This is super helpful to use common definitions in your organization, and we know that this is not an easy challenge to tackle. So the glossary is really about defining the common language through business terms, basically describing the data domains. And we allow you not just to document it, but you can tag the metadata with it. So this is invaluable as the tables or files that you document can be somewhat illegible. It can be hard to tell at the first sight what it contains. So having it tagged with the business terms provides significant value. If I were to move here to the data quality, this is a really strong capability that we offer. I could divide it in two parts. One is that we actually generate some data quality when we document the sources kind of by default. So you get some actionable insights right away out of the box. But not only that, we actually allow you to set up DQ monitoring projects, which you can use to track specific dimensions and set up specific checks based on data quality rules to really specifically evaluate the data points that are relevant for your business case. So building up on the data quality, we also have something that is called anomaly detection. And anomaly detection allows you to, without any additional work with setting up rules, classifying the metadata, this basically allows you to get insights kind of for free. The platform generates it automatically. So during the documentation, we are calculating some descriptive statistics. And if the descriptive statistics is somewhat out of ordinary, its value, we will notify you. So if, for example, the null count of rows or of like cells of some attribute suddenly jumps from 20% to 50%, or from 2% to 15%, we will notify you proactively. So this is additional value added on top of the data quality. So having gone through that, through the Ataccama 1 platform capabilities, I will now get back to the augmented lineage, and I will tell you what are the benefits that you can actually gain when the MANTA lineage and Ataccama 1 data governance and data quality platform come together, and what are the results and potential benefits of this joint effort for your business. So for one, you can really supercharge understanding of your metadata, as we can leverage all the documentation from the catalog and from the glossary. You can get much more context and insights both into the metadata as well as to the related entities easily. You can understand where are your metadata located. You can see sometimes very technical information about assets such as tables or files with some business context. And you can also track on higher level of abstraction what are all the places or the systems which, for example, contain some business domain of either personal or business sensitive data. We definitely don't stop here, and we create additional benefits in data quality. So with the augmented lineage, you can track how quality improves with transformations and cleansing, and it works also the other way. So you can easily visually find out whether there isn't some issue when you're developing, for example, some ETL job. You can check on a aggregated level whether it hasn't made the data quality of the result of the transformation worse. you can as well use it to find the root cause of low quality. So it definitely makes the root cause analysis easier for you, and as well as the debugging of such issues. And last not the least, you can definitely get much more confidence when using metadata and data, because you can use in the context of the catalog and glossary, you can use the augmented lineage to actually confirm that you are working with the right data set, or maybe it can actually give you some hint that there might be a more appropriate, more fitting data asset that supports your use case. How do we do it more practically? How do we deliver this value added? So the integration is really smooth. You can, when you're navigating the catalog, the lineage calculation is just one click away. So the integration works in a way that when you launch it, when you launch the calculation, it fetches the results from MANTA, and you can observe it. You can explore the data flows with the added enriched context directly in the catalog. So you can see the further metadata as well as the data quality. And if you have the need to actually see more detail in MANTA, because MANTA definitely has great capabilities on the technical level, you can then smoothly transition from the view of the lineage of some data asset, some catalog item, back to MANTA. To illustrate this visually, it's really a one click of a button away. So if you click on that, it calculates the lineage in MANTA, fetches it into catalog, and you would get a visualization of the data flows like this. So this is the bare visualization, but already as the assets are documented in catalog, you can get some context on those. So you can read some description of the data asset. You can check what is its location, what's the origin, observe some metadata, both custom and those which are by default set up by us. But that's just the beginning. So when we move further and when we leverage the glossary capability, we can tag the tables as they are imported with business terms, which make it clear what the metadata actually contains. This is really important and really useful, as you can see, for example, here in the first table, the attribute names can be quite illegible, and this is often the case. We all of us have met it, right? Field 1, field 2, and especially in tools like SAP, this is often the case. So having the terms tagged to the attributes or the assets really gives useful context. You can tag it based on rules or using the artificial intelligence, which suggests you where the terms can be assigned. So there are multiple ways how to skin the cat, and we are definitely thinking when delivering and developing the capability to save your time. So when you assign the terms, you get some additional context. You can actually get into the detail of the term again to read some description, understand the relationships of the term, etc. And then when the terms are there, the terms actually have some rules set up, either detection or data quality rules. And if you are using those data quality rules, you can and then you assign it to, for example, some attribute. You can then track the quality of the data in this attribute as part of the documentation, which is happening periodically. So it's always up to date. And you can see nicely here that originally we wouldn't even know what's the REC attribute. Thanks to the terms, we learned that that's a transaction amount in some specific point of sale. And we can see here that the quality of that attribute is really bad. Then there was some ETL job that actually took the data from this particular table and moved it into a sort of aggregated table, POS transactions. And as the ETL job consisted also of some cleansing, we can see that the quality has improved on the amount in the asset that we are seeing in the middle of in the center of the screen. So you can always leverage that the other way around. So you can definitely investigate if the transformations are happening as they are expected, and if it hasn't introduced any new issues. And if it has, you can again check more detail. You can investigate what precisely is wrong. You can display the invalid samples, and that is really useful when you want to find what's the root cause and then debug it and repair the ETL. So the next thing I've mentioned already, the anomalies. That's something that we do out of the box, even without you setting up any rules. So basically, when we calculate, or our AI module calculates that there is some anomaly, we display it here. It again makes it very easy for you to track whether that's just a one-off thing, or whether maybe anomaly introduced somewhere downstream caused some further anomalies upstream. So you can easily track it in the lineage view or augmented lineage view. And you can again go into much more detail to evaluate what statistics are actually anomalous. And for example, here in the with the amount attribute, you can see that the average was around 10,000, and suddenly after the last refresh of the metadata, you can learn that it's dropped to 87, which is very suspicious. So it should give you a hint that something went wrong in the transformation, and you should check it. So let me summarize now. What have we learned? You saw so far that in augmented lineage, with the help of Ataccama, we are enriching the lineage with metadata from catalog, data quality, and some more specific features, and that unlocks the potential for you to get additional value. It's definitely helping bring lineage closer to business users because the added context makes the lineage really much more actionable. You can really supercharge the understanding of your metadata and as well as the data flows with the added context. It's making it easier for you to increase the data quality and definitely increase your confidence in the data when you want to use it. That's it from me. I would hand it over to Drew, and thank you for your attention. It was a delight to show you the potential of augmented lineage.
Thank you both for your insightful presentations. We are a little bit over time, so I do want to touch quickly on the ability to mention that although we focused on data lineage for today, the Ataccama One platform covers a wide range of use cases, everything from data governance, metadata management, leveraging AI and machine learning through the data quality process, as well as MDM and reference data management, etc. If you guys have any further questions or want to discuss any pain points or challenges within your enterprise, I'd like to encourage you to reach out to us or our close partners at MANTA. We'd be happy to set up demos through info@ataccama.com, or you can contact MANTA at getmanta for more info. Again, so for the survey, we'd love to learn about how you enjoyed the content of the presentations for today. A short survey will pop up at the end, and it will take a few minutes just to fill it out to have a chance to win the $30 Amazon gift card. We will be sharing the recording of this webinar in the next couple of days. I do hope you all enjoyed it very much, and thanks again for attending. And quickly, just a few questions. I see that David has been writing away to answer as many as possible, but I did want to touch on a couple here which have not been responded to. First from Stephanie, this would be for you, David. Are you able to understand the frequency of a source being used and or the impact of the source on the final outcomes? For example, how many reports, queries, etc. rely on X source?
Yeah, so the answer to that would be that the frequency from the perspective of how many different components would rely on that, we can certainly provide information on. The frequency as far as, how often does a user run a report or something along those lines, we don't track that information. I'm sorry, what was the second part of that question?
How many reports, queries, etc. would rely on X source?
Right. Okay. So certainly we can provide that information. What information? What tools are using a source of information?
Okay. Question for you, Borek. If a customer is asking if we do not have MANTA lineage tools, can we get the same lineage views as you were showing in Ataccama 1?
If you don't have the MANTA tool.
Yes.
Yeah. So in principle, our interface is robust enough to accommodate other vendors, but we have exclusive partnership with MANTA that really allows us to leverage the best of our joint capabilities. You can, in theory, also use it manually, but I would suggest against because that's a mammoth task to take care of that on your own. It's better to use some dedicated vendor which specializes in automating the data flows discovery.
Okay, thank you, Borek. David, one more for you. Can MANTA lineage be utilized inside other third-party ETL tools?
So if you're looking to use an ETL tool to grab the lineage from MANTA and then leverage that somehow in another tool programmatically, you can do that through the use of our APIs.
Okay. There are a couple others here. Just looking at the time, looks like we do have still quite a few folks that are part of this. I think we're looking at one more. So David, looks like you answered the question to SAP, but we have another question saying, let's look at SAP to the Azure Data Lake storage to Power BI. Is this a data flow that we think we could be able to extract lineage from?
Yes, those are technologies that we support.
All right, and one last question that I see here is, how often does the lineage data from MANTA flow to Ataccama? Is it on a real-time basis?
Yeah, so the answer to that is that it is not on a real-time basis. Data lineage is not calculated in real time. The expectation should be that that is done on a scheduled basis. The majority of my clients run it on a weekly or a monthly basis, depending on the rate of change in their environment. Now, MANTA does have a capability which allows you to analyze a single component in real time. So let's say, for example, that a developer is putting together a complex SQL statement and they want to see the lineage that that SQL statement generates. You can use MANTA to analyze that single source.
Okay, so we do have a few questions left over. I would encourage you to reach out to either info at ataccama.com or of course get MANTA as well, and we can respond to those as well. We are hitting the top of the hour, so we are quite over time. I do appreciate everyone for joining today. I hope it was beneficial and valuable to each one of you and your organizations. And thank you to David and Borek for your presentations. They were very insightful and I quite enjoyed them myself. So that is all for today, everyone. I appreciate everyone's time. And again, thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you. It's been a delight.
Take care, guys.